Hi, in today's video we are going to discuss some of the terms in Agile project management which might be useful for your PMP exam. Before we get started with describing the Agile terms, first of all let's understand what is Agile. If you have some knowledge of the project management, you will understand that there are two types of project life cycles. One is the waterfall or plan-driven, another is the Agile or change-driven. There's a third type which is the mix of both Agile and waterfall. We call it the hybrid project life cycle. As you can see in the definition here, Agile is a project management approach based on delivering requirements iteratively and incrementally throughout the project's life cycle. This means that the project's product is not delivered all at once. It is divided into increments or maybe iterations, and then completing the project increment by increment results in the final product of the project. In the waterfall life cycle, what do we have is we have a plan and we know what our end product will look like. But in Agile, on the other hand, we don't know the actual scope of the project. The scope of the project will be delivered in sprints or iterations or maybe increments. The first thing in an Agile project is the Scrum Master, or in other words, it's also called the Agile Project Manager. This individual is responsible for managing the Agile project. The Scrum Master acts as a point where all the other entities involved in the project meet. Or in other words, the Scrum Master facilitates the communication between different entities. And besides that, it paves the road for the development team so that they can complete the project's deliverables smoothly and without facing any significant obstacles throughout their way. Next person in the Agile project is the product owner. As in the waterfall, we have the project sponsor who is representing the customer on the project. The product owner serves the same role or the same purpose in an Agile project. This person ensures that all the requirements collected from the stakeholders and the customer are correctly incorporated in the project's product. Next term in Agile project is the product backlog. As we collect the requirements from all the entities involved in the project, we have to store those requirements in a specific place where we can take out each of them one by one and incorporate it in the project scope. One thing you should bear in mind for your PMP exam, that the requirements are not only stored in the product's backlog, but besides that, they're prioritized in the product's backlog. As you can see in the figure here, we have the high priority items listed at the top here, and the items with low priority goes to the bottom of the list. And as we go ahead in the project, the items may be reprioritized and maybe some new items will be added to the product backlog. A product backlog should have the deep characteristics. By D, we mean that the items in the product backlog should be detailed appropriately. The items with high priority should be detailed, while the items with low priority can be with lower amount of detail. The next letter is E, or estimated. In order to carry out work on specific items or specific requirements, we should understand how long will it take for them to be completed or how much will it take for them to be completed. The next E stands for emergent, which means that nothing in the product backlog remains forever. And nothing is prominent in there. A new item or a new requirement might be added anytime throughout the project's life cycle, or another item or requirement might be deleted from the product backlog. And the P stands for prioritize. The items in the product backlog should be in a descending order. The one with high priority should be at the top, should be detailed in a fair amount. There should be estimations present for its timeline and cost, and the items at the bottom might not require that amount of detail. The next term in Agile project is the user story. A user story is an informal type of collecting requirements where the stakeholder asks for a specific feature in the product. There are three things which should be there in the user story. Number one, who are we building it for? So if you're adding a feature to our software or any other project, who has asked us to add this feature? Or for example, who will be using that feature? Next thing is, in order for a user story to be clear, we should know what are we going to build. So the scope of the user story should be clear in order for the development team to understand it and implement it in the sprints of the project. Lastly, we should have a good reason behind building a specific feature into our product. Or in other words, why are we building that specific feature? And what value will it add to the customer or the end user? A user story should have the invest characteristics. First of all, it should be independent. So it should be a standalone product backlog item with no dependencies with other items in the product's backlog. It should be negotiable. As we know, Agile, in other words, is change-driven, which means that the requirements of the stakeholders will change in short amount of times. So a good user story should be negotiable. And we should ensure that we can make adjustments to the user story whenever it's required or asked by the project stakeholders. Next thing is, it should be valuable. The specific user story should bring some ease to the end user or add some value to the customer or whoever is funding the project. It should be estimatable. We should know how long will it take for the user story to be completed and how much will it take for the user story to be completed. And the S in invest stands for small. It should be small enough to be estimated and tested. And lastly, it should be testable. So as we have the definition of done, we can test it against the criteria which is listed in the DOD or definition of done. Next term is sprint. A sprint is usually a 1 to 4 weeks duration where the development team actually implements the items from the backlog into the project. So what the development team does is they take out sprint backlogs for each sprint from the product's backlog. Then they select a specific sprint backlog and implement it in each sprint, which will last from 1 to 4 weeks. In the sprint, we have the planning stage, then we have the implementation, we review what we did, and lastly, we have a retrospective where we deliver the feature to the customer. In order to get started with the sprint, we should hold a sprint planning meeting. In this meeting, the development team, the Scrum Master, the other stakeholders from the organization will determine what features or what things will be done in the upcoming sprint. The maximum amount of time which could be designated for a sprint planning meeting is usually 8 hours. Next, we have the sprint backlog. We talked about the product backlog. What we do is we take out specific items out of the product backlog and include it in each of the sprints. And all the items listed in the sprint backlog will be completed in one sprint. Next, we have the daily stand-up meeting. It's a 15-minute long meeting before the team is deployed at the site. There are usually 3 questions asked from each team member in this meeting. Question number 1, what did you do yesterday? Question number 2, what will you do tomorrow? And the last question is, are there any problems on your way? So once this meeting is done, the team goes to the site and starts working. Next, we have the sprint review meeting. This is an informal meeting inside the organization to inspect what was delivered in the sprint. After this meeting, we have the sprint retrospective. This is an official meeting with the customer and the organization involved. The team reviews the things that went right and the things that went wrong. And besides that, they release the feature for the customer's use. Next is the release. After completing one or many sprints, there might be a specific feature which will be added to the product. And once that feature is added to the product and is ready to be used by the customer, it's called a release. And lastly, we have definition of done. It's a criteria against which the Agile team measures their progress and their conformance to the project scope. I hope you found the content of the video useful. If you did so, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel and following us on Instagram and LinkedIn. Thank you very much for watching.